It's finally time to put together the PTO assembly. I've had this painted and cleaned up for many months, probably almost a year. And here's a quick walk around. The races are already installed. They've been installed. I just cleaned it up with those in place. The bearing in the back there supports the end of the input shaft on the transmission. Races here are installed. The PTO pulley. All the threads are chased. Everything's cleaned up. Should be ready to go. Let's go look at the other parts. Here's a diagram of everything in the shop manual. This is our hall layout. PTO pulley. Ready to go. Got the shield for the PTO. Shims for the bearing preload on the PTO shaft. Those go underneath this retainer. I already installed this seal. I was worried about it fitting properly, so I put it in place. It fit a little looser than I would like. I had to tap it in still, but it wasn't a super tight fit, so I put a little bit of RTV coating on it and then tapped it in to help hold it. I can't push it out with my fingers now, so I think we're good to go. I installed that earlier just so the RTV can be dry. Here's our seals. Here's the PTO pulley seal. Part number 450444, National. This oil seal part number is for the PTO shaft. I have the larger diameter PTO shaft. 470135. And you can see the dimensions there. It did fit loose in this, but I held it up to the other one I had and it fit better. I did not use the other PTO cover because it was cracked. This bottom half was broken. The bolt was over tightened. Alright, so we got the PTO engagement shaft. Here's the PTO shaft itself. I painted this silver so it'll stay clean. This will probably never get used, so I'll keep it from rusting. If it does, oh well, it'll scrape the paint off, but the sealing surface had a little bit of a groove in it, but not too bad. I polished that up real good. The cam lobes that run the hydraulic pump look great. And this is a bearing that would go on the end. This gear actually goes on the end. This bevel gear will run the PTO pulley. And this larger straight cut gear is where the input shaft from the transmission engages it. So this race will go to the PTO. Here is the engagement fork that will shift the gear that slides on the input shaft of the transmission and engage it with this gear. Then you got a detent spring and ball with that. And a bolt to lock it in. This shaft is our PTO pulley shaft. One thing I do not like is it was originally designed for, I believe, a leather seal. And it has a spiral groove in it. So we'll see how this goes. I could get a seal saver and press over that, but I don't think it'll be an issue. So we'll see. On the back of the shaft, we have this bevel gear slides on. Actually, take that back. The bearing would slide on, then the spacer would slide on, then the bevel gear would slide on, and we tighten it all down with a nut. And this bolt and lock washer hold the PTO pulley on. Alright, let's get started. First step is to install the PTO pulley shaft. It's going to slide into the end here. So off camera, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the races, wipe it out one more time, and put a little grease on the bearing. Alright, so we're going to slide this shaft in. No seals in place at this point. The seal goes in afterwards. Then we're going to install the bearing. Bearing might be easier said than done. Let me see if I can tap that in. Alright. I'll try to do this and not get in the way. Alright. Like it's a tad crooked. Okay, it's going now. It's really hard to hold this at the same time as I hit it, because I don't want the rollers to be resting on it while I'm tapping it. Ideally, it would be hovering like that, but it's almost impossible. Seems to be going okay, though. We'll tap it on a few more times. It looks like I'm dinging that spline a little bit. Okay, so that socket I was using is kind of starting to mangle up the splines a little bit. I think it's going pretty easy now. I'm going to try a brass punch. If I can keep it there, we'll be good. Just needs to go down a tad more. And I think I can get a bite on the threads if I need to. Yep, I'm going plenty. So first thing is the spacer. Which even it doesn't like the splines that I'm mangled up. That sucks. Not bad though. Okay. Just tapped it on there and it went right on. See if we can do the same with the gear. Gear feels like it goes on there a little bit, so we might be good to go. I'll tap it here and see if it does anything for me. If it does not, I'll take it apart and fix the splines, but I'm hoping it slides on easy. That's giving me plenty of threads to work with. So I greased up the threads so they wouldn't gall and stick. And hopefully it didn't mess up the end at all. So they're started. It takes a little effort to screw it all the way down anyway. On my test fit to test the threads, it was like that. Alright, my issue is holding this other shaft. The keyway decided to take off some skin. I'm going to try something here. I'm going to Try to place that pulley in place a little bit. See if I could hold it with that without it causing too much trouble. So I don't really want to put the keyway all the way in, because it's hell to get out before I put that seal in. Well, that worked. So this shaft here does not have any way to adjust preload other than tightening down that nut. You tighten it to where it should be. Let me wipe that grease off. Then peen the end of the nut over so it won't come loose. We spin great, but I still have a little bit of end play. So I'm going to go a little tighter. So I don't have to go as far. I'll just hold it. I'll impact it a little bit and then feel it. Still got a tad. I think that's good. I feel a little bit of resistance now. Not much. And there is no play. It's almost where it was originally. Makes me wonder if I should just tap it a tad more till it matches where it was. Because this is the same shaft, same bearing, same housing. Everything came out of this housing. So yeah, I might tap it just a tad, since it's so close to where it was originally. And the bearings and gears weren't worn at all. So I'm going to assume that was a good spot for it. There we go. So now I just need to pin that nut in place. Looks like I should have used a blunt or chisel. Or this. Cut right through it. Okay, we're going to go with that. So from all that hammering on it, I got a little bit of metal flakes and stuff in there. I got to clean those out real quick. Once I do that, we'll continue on to the main shaft. So in this step, I slide this shaft in from the back, and it goes through this gear and then into this bearing. I'm not sure how easy this will be to see. My hands will probably be in the way, but we'll give it our best shot. So the bearing's in. I'll hold this gear against the bearing as I attempt to slide this shaft through. Well, it took a little bit of tapping on it to get it out of there originally. Go ahead and try out my mallet. I guess if I tear up this PTO shaft, well, not tear up, but mess up the paint a little, I could always repaint it. So Yeah, it actually slid really easy. Hitting it with this rubber mallet here, or plastic mallet. I don't want to beat on that too much. I'm afraid I might tear up the bearing. What I'm going to try, see if I can get long enough bolts to press it in from this side. Okay, there's my rig. I'll see if it works. Alright, it just got tight. And it looks like it's fully seated. That's good. Just to make sure. So looking at this side, the shaft protrudes from the bearing a little bit. That's about where it's supposed to be. Coming back to the rear, our next step is to install this race. I have a tool here that almost looks like it was made for this. So now it's time to install the seal housing and shims to set the bearing preload, but we're running into an issue here. This race should be up far enough where it would go into here. Measuring this race, it sticks out about 80 thousandths. This is about 120 thousandths groove. So even if I tighten this down with no shims, it's not going to make contact. The other thing I am running into at this point, I'm not sure if my mic is picking this up because my noise canceling microphone tends to not pick up a lot of noise other than voice. Spins free, but there's a lot of noise here between the gears. We have excessive backlash in the bevel gears. So try to zoom in where we can see this. So what you'll want to look at here, sort of blocking it, but see this gear my finger's on? Okay, that gear messes with this larger gear. I'm going to hold the large gear stationary and turn the small gear. I'm not in front of the camera, so I can't tell if it's showing up, but you should be able to see that excessive play. That is a lot of backlash. So what that's telling me, here you can see it good like this too. Yeah. So that backlash is telling me that this large gear needs to either go forward more. I'm zoomed in. Let me get rid of that zoom. There we go. This large gear needs to go forward or back more, deeper into this housing, or that other gear needs a larger spacer and come out. But the fact our race is not coming out far enough, that tells me this whole shaft needs to shift backwards. So what I need to do is figure out where I need to put a spacer. Judging from the way this is sticking out, and this is the way it was when I took it apart, but I didn't notice that backlash being that bad before, but I didn't pay attention either. I'm thinking I will get a spacer the size of this bearing, or this shaft, and put between the bearing and that gear. And that should clear it up. But anyway, for now I'm going to do a little digging on it. Starting a storm here, so I'm going to call it a night on this. Tomorrow when I come back, I'll finish this video. Hopefully. Okay, I'm back on this PTO assembly. Right now I don't have my headset on because I want you to hear something, and my headset's noise canceling, so that eliminates that. I don't remember exactly where I left off with this video. It was over a week ago, and I was sick for the week, so I have not been up here, have not looked at it or thought about it. But I was tinkering with it after that last section of video, and before I was going to put a spacer behind this bearing, shift everything back, to move this bevel gear forward to get rid of some of the end play. And that worked for getting rid of the end play, but the issue I have is now the gears make a noise. Let's see if this camera will actually pick it up. The end play is a lot less. But we got a noise. So the way this thing is supposed to adjust your backlash is the bevel gear way in the back, the smaller one that attaches to this shaft. There's a shim behind it, and you change that shim thickness. But I only have that one shim. So I'm going to remove this shaft, remove that gear, and get a hold of that shim and see if I could make something a tad thicker and try it out. What I will still run into, though, is the issue that I can't take up all my end play because this bearing is too far in. So I am going to, two things I'm going to try. I can install a shim between this shaft and this gear where the shaft moves forward to take up end play, but the gear stays in the same position. Or, and most likely what I'll probably try, is cut a shim that fits inside of my retainer the same size as this race to take up the slack. One thing I'm wondering about is where the pump rides on this shaft. Looking at the wear on it, which there's not a lot of wear, but looks like it probably rides pretty close to the middle. I might not want to push that shaft forward or back any. So, alright, I'm going to take the shaft back out. Last time I hammered it out the back, but now I have the right tool. So I'll attempt to do it like we're supposed to. Although this thing's at a little bit of an angle, a little bit of a bind. We'll see what it does. It's at an angle, for sure, but it's going smooth, so I'll go with it. Race just popped out of the backside. Alright, so it's through the bearing. Now we're just taking the shaft and driving it out of that gear. Here we go. It came right out the back. That was way better for it than wailing on it with a hammer. Got to clean those off again before I put them back. There's a little bit of metal on them from where that puller dug into the center here. But not a big deal. Alright, next I'll try to bend this tab back out. And that's making it worse. I really put that thing in there tough. Should have done it with a flat like I did before. Oop, should have done it with a flat punch instead of a chisel. Alright, let's see if that comes off easy enough without ripping threads with it. Oh, I forgot to turn on my camera. I got a puller installed on there. I have not tried to pull it off yet. Oops. Well, it was coming off. Pretty easy. Sliding off so easy, it's not holding the puller in place. See if a pry bar let it slide right off. It's moving. Camera is right in the way doing that. I'll try to get the camera where we can see it. Big mistake here is when I was tapping that gear in place and the bearing in place, I did not realize that the tool I was using is a spacer. I think it was a socket now, I can't remember, but I did not realize it was smaller than the diameter of the splines, and it tore up the edge of the splines a little bit. Alright, it's about a ½ inch off. It's getting there. See if I can pry it from a couple different sides. I don't know. See, it's almost there. Alright, I'm going to put my puller back in there and pull it off. I'm not going to do it on camera because you can't really see anything around it anyway, and I need my arms going into both sides. So I shall return. Alright, so I installed this shaft and the bearing. Should be good to go now, and try to add some spacers on that here. Here's what I came up with. I actually found a spacer that would work. Had a thrust bearing out of an automatic transmission. So my original shim is about 41 thou. This one's 57. I don't think that's quite enough. I'm going to install them both to start with and go from there. This shim is a lot larger diameter, but it doesn't matter, it clears everything. And it does cover a lot of that bearing, but there's a gap there where oil can still get through. And this is actually the oil supply hole. When the differential is turning, fills oil back here, and also oil gets in here and it leaves there's like a reservoir inside of here that'll hold a level of oil, probably about a ½ inch deep on both, and it'll cover both bearings. Okay, I'll install the small shim first, and the large one. And my gear. And the nut. I don't want to impact this on right now if I can help it. So I'll see if I can get enough bite on it with this. It'd be easier if I had two people here, but Also, I'll tap it to free up any binding. There might be. Alright, we spin good. And there's no in play. So now I need to install the PTO shaft in that gear assembly again and see if it's good there. There is a possibility I could take this apart a few times. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to go ahead and put this all back together and see what happens. Alright, still sounds a little rough. The backlash didn't change much. I know I don't have the shaft all the way in, but I have it where the gear and the bearing are pressed tight and there's no in play right now. Alright, it's a little too noisy in my opinion. I'm going to remove the thinner shim and leave the thick shim and see if that changes anything. So I'm going to basically put my puller back on here and pop this off, but I won't worry about doing this on camera. Actually, maybe I will. I'll just speed it up. You know what, considering the backlash that it had, and the fact that it had a ton of in play on that shaft before and there's no real wear on here, I think I'm not going to concern myself with the in play as much as get rid of that noise. Especially since I won't really be using the pulley. Probably going to be there for decoration at this point. Okay, we're going to go with this. I have a little bit of in play here, or I'm sorry, a little bit of backlash, but I get no gear noise. It's all quiet. And to me, that's going to be way more important than the backlash at this point. So I tried two different ways. I shimmed this gear forward, and it got noisy. So I backed it off till it was quiet again. And I shimmed that pulley, or that gear this direction till it got noisy and had to back it off some. It does have a thicker shim in it now than it did originally, so we're probably a little better off. On this setup here, just for me measuring this backlash and listening to it, notice this shaft isn't pressed all the way in, but I have it pressed in to the point where there is no in play, and this gear and bearings tight against the back. So that's all I need to do this measurement. I know my noise canceling headset, you can't really hear the gears, but they're not making any noise at this point. I hear the bearings more than anything. What I need to do now is stake that nut on the PTO pulley shaft, and then install this shafting gear the rest of the way. But I think I'm going to need to remove this shaft to be able to stake that nut down. There's no real way to get to it otherwise. So let me take this shaft back out, stake that nut down, and we'll put it back together. And that should be the final assembly for that part. Well, I'm definitely not going to mangle that up with a regular chisel this time. I want to use this blunt edge to bend it over so I don't cut into it this time. Alright, well, it looks good to go. There is zero end play on this shaft. It spins free. So the manual on this one just basically states tighten down that nut until you have zero end play and the bearings are still free rolling. We should be good to go. Okay, now I'm going to put the PTO shaft in for the final time. Okay, now I get to press this in place like I did before. Now, if you remember the first time we put this together, when we tightened down our retainer, this bearing race never made contact. So I could not set the preload. And that was an issue before because this had all kinds of slack in it when I took it apart. So what I'm going to need to do, since I didn't offset this shaft out any, I'm going to make a shim to stick in here. Made my shim. It'll fit right in here. Press against this outer race. What I'll do now is go ahead and tighten this down. With these shims in place and see what it does. So I still have a little bit of end play. I did not drive this race all the way in because I want to make sure this makes contact and does it. And I'm not going to put any sealant on these yet, just like everything else. I want to make sure it works first. I want to tighten this down. I got to be careful. I don't want to crack this. It's not steel, I don't think. Well, no, it's not steel. I don't think it's cast iron. Right. Forgot a washer on this one. Okay. Right now, we are a tad too tight. Let me check to see if I have another shim for this. If I do not have another shim to add here, I will need to take that spacer I made and sand it down a little. Should be good to go here. Let me add this one and see what we get. because that race is stuck forward and we're still a little stiff here. Do want to tap it back. This way I can tell if it tightens it down too much. Okay, that is nice. Okay, we have 0 play. It spins very well. There's a plate that goes over this, but I will install that later. Last thing, actually, once I seal up these shims. I'll just show you what we got here. There's the inside. Walking around in the dark. Okay, so it's getting late tonight, so I'm going to call it quits for tonight. But the next step is to install the PTO engagement control. So we'll do that. I'll probably set the pulley on it. I won't tighten it tight though, because I'll need to take it off for install. And then I'll want to put some grease on those lobes, put the pump in place and spin it, and then see where they're tracking, just to make sure the rollers are not tracking offset of those lobes at all. That'll be for tomorrow. Now we're going to go ahead and install this PTO engagement lever. It'll come through here. Up here is where there's a spring and detent ball. I put a magnet in the bottom of this just like I did the transmission in the back corner there. Glued it down. It's pretty messy. When I had it nice and neat and tried to put it in there, it kept sticking to everything, so I just threw it back there and pressed it down flat. So should be good enough. Alright, so this is the lever. Clean it off some and grease it here in a second, but I was doing some testing before. On mine there was no seal here at all. There was nothing to seal it against it when I took it apart. It's cupped looking like there was supposed to be. So what I did is I found an O-ring that was large enough that it stuck out just a tad. And when we go to slide this in, which I'm going to take it back out and grease it beforehand. Let's see if we can get the camera closer. And you can see it there. So notice how there's a little bit of a gap there, but if I press it, it'll compress the O-ring. So when I install the piece on the other side, it should hold it in and keep it sealed tight. Originally I was just going to put a lot of grease on there and not worry about it, but I found that O-ring that seemed to fit pretty good. So I'm going to clean this shaft off, clean that bore out again just to make sure, and then grease everything up. Okay. There we go. We'll just let that lay down there for now. There's going to be a little bit of a balancing act here. This ball and spring we're going to hold up here, and it will press against this lever, and then we'll put a set screw in it, tie it off. So I have the screw started, just got to run it in. Detent ball's in place. Screw does have to engage that hole right there. Definitely isn't the easiest to compress. Let's see if I can figure out a way to do that. Let's try this block of wood here. This is a pain to work around the camera, but see what we could do. I'm going to go ahead and remove this screw, which is binding, so that tells me it's touching. That's not good. Maybe that's my hold up the whole time. Okay, this way I can look through and see the hole. See when it lines up. Getting there. Really close. Okay. Alright. Feels good. I'll need to tie that off. So I have plenty of annealed wire for this, but I do not have a tool normally associated with tying this off. If the main bearing caps ended up having it, I was going to buy one, but just for this one, I'm going to wing it with some vice grips. Let's go this way. Okay. Worked out pretty good. No way that one's coming out. Even if it became loose, it wouldn't be a problem because it has to turn multiple turns before it comes out. Alright, what's next? Next thing we got to seal. This seal. Alright, here's our PTO pulley seal. So here is a piece of pipe I'm going to use to tap this seal on. And since the edge is a little rough, I sanded it and put some masking tape over it just so it doesn't scar up the seal too bad. But it's about the right size, so we'll see if we can get it on there straight. There we go. Take this brass hammer, go ahead and tap our key in here. Burr of metal there. Not quite all the way down. I can still see a little gap on the end. Pretty close. Alright, I'm not going to fully install this pulley, tighten it down or anything, because this will probably need to be off while I'm installing this on the tractor. But I do want to see what it looks like and get it close. The pulley right now is already tighter than it was when I took it off. Alright, we got one more step. One more step in assembly. Then I have a test I want to do. We need to remove this housing, seal the shims, and install the PTO guard on top. There's our spacer hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and paint these up. Some copper coat. And then I'll be back. Okay. The first shim to go down had paint on both sides, so it would seal on this side also. Then the rest of them just paint on the top. Well, not paint, but the copper coat. And that top one's just to align it. Something else I forgot about too. These bolts actually protrude into the gearbox. So I need some thread sealant. Just a little bit. Don't want the stuff oozing out everywhere. Alright, we'll see how this thing works. Technically it's done. Do a quick walk around here. Guess I'll do a walk around with the light. Then maybe we'll see more. Okay. Start back here where we just were. Bearing and seal retainer on the back. PTO shield or guard. Got the pulley. Your internals and lever. Something I was thinking about last night. With the extra end play I had and this shaft pushed in a little bit, that seal's really close to those splines. I think that shaft did get pushed in. And what probably happened is whatever equipment may have been running on this, which there's not much, there's not many marks on it, so I don't know for sure if there was anything on it even before. This PTO assembly actually, this tractor actually had a belly mower on it. It had a big V-belt pulley here, and it ran a belly mower. But one thing I was looking at and thinking, if this shaft got shifted back, maybe there was an implement or something that had a PTO connected to it that bound up and forced it forward. And it could have possibly bent this a little bit, bent it inward. Although I would think you might see some stress, or since it's cast, it would have cracked. That's totally me just guessing at this point, but there we go. So one more thing I want to do real quick. I want to make sure my hydraulic pump the rollers are centered on those lobes. And so how I'm going to do that is put a little grease on it, on the lobes, bolt the pump up, and see where it rides. Got to turn the camera back on and set the pump in place, but all you missed is I put grease on the cam lobes, on the eccentrics there, and gently, without tearing up a ton of paint, bolting up the hydraulic pump. Now I'll rotate it. Should track well on there and show me. See if you could actually see this thing working. So right there you can see the plungers in and out. Those roller rockers sitting on top of the plunger. That's what's going on the whole time your PTO's on. And you see the pickup tube right there, just off the bottom, which my light's so bright it's putting it out. There it is. Alright, let's unbolt this thing and see how it looks. Tell you what, chasing these threads makes everything so much easier. Every bolt in this I could thread in by hand to get it down. Okay, so I have to lean it back to get the pickup tube out, because the pickup tube goes in like that. Set this down and see what we got. This is where my pump's been waiting all this time to be installed. It's been keeping track of time. I got parts laying everywhere for this thing. On the camshaft eccentric here, you can see it's actually riding pretty centered. You can see that mark where it pushed the grease all the way off both sides. Looks like it's good to go.